Open your eyes. Open your eyes.
The new Legend of Zelda game has been released to extremely positive reviews and reactions. It initially took me a long time to find someone who had something genuinely negative to say about the game, which got me thinking, is Zelda actually that good? And if it is, why? Because two things are undeniably true about The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. The game is beautifully styled and, after the first 5 hours, utterly bland. The gameplay becomes repetitive, and while the occasional surprise rears its head, play sessions become a chore of Ubisoft-style walking and tower capturing. But it's still fun, which is frustrating, because I want to dislike the game, but I just can't. So I did some digging to work out why I keep coming back and why I keep playing. In Clint Hawking's frequently cited GDC 09 speech, Fault Tolerance from Intentionality to Improvisation, Clint discusses the complex nature of balancing systems to allow players to experience intentionality as improvisation, because real improvisation creates odd, unpredictable results in game engines, and anything you don't plan for, you probably can't code for. So let's take an example from the new Zelda to demonstrate intentionality. You're walking through the countryside, and as you crest a hill, you notice an enemy beneath a cliff you're standing on. You pull out a bomb, set it on the edge, and give the bomb a nudge. The bomb rolls down the hill, and you trigger the explosive. The player has demonstrated intentionality because there was never a tutorial where the game told you to stand on top of hills and roll bombs into enemies. But using the gameplay systems, the player followed a series of steps to achieve what the game designers did intend you to do, which is to kill enemies. The problem with Breath of the Wild lies in the ability for the player to create their own intention, and this phase is known as composition. And Zelda offers their players composition through two tools, the crouch button and the bow and arrow. The players can view enemies from a distance, sneak and begin to pick off guards, either through the melee system with the Y button, or blow up explosive barrels with bows and arrows, or just pick off enemies with your bow and arrow. It's a formula that was executed perfectly by Arkham Asylum because this planning phase offered both variety and immediacy. The difference between Arkham and Zelda is how composition translates to execution. In Arkham, you flitter between the ceiling rafters, plan your assault, and begin picking off your enemies. Let's say you misjudge a movement and get spotted. Rather than get killed immediately, you have two options, to fight or run. The genius of the Arkham mechanics is that both fighting and running are challenging, and regardless of the decision you make, you're eventually forced to return to the composition stage. You either fail to escape and are killed, or you eventually successfully escape and hide, re-entering the composition phase of gameplay. This creates a sense of immediacy as you forge through the different areas and different locations in the game, and as you move through the different combat scenarios. And this is where Zelda really struggles. Truly great action games have unpredictable systems that shove the player from one state to another, where single continuity of intent is disrupted, forcing a transition to the other state, which creates, in the gameplay developer's mind, system-planned improvisation, where the system has been built to force the player to make a decision on the fly. In Zelda, the closest thing to this system-planned improvisation is your weapons or shields breaking in the middle of a fight. It causes a moment of panic as your execution is interrupted, and you have to briefly compose a new plan. You have to ask yourself what's the next weapon you'll choose to fight off these enemies, or will you use a rune bomb to try and escape? This is pretty much the only place this happens in the game. It becomes more than frustrating, and I've turned off the game a few times to think about whether or not I want to continue during these moments where my weapons keep breaking. On top of this, Link is clumsy, and the range of controls jammed into the limited button configurations on the Joy-Con could have easily been solved if the developers had workshopped some other options. Link is supposed to be a legendary, experienced warrior in this game, but the occasional floaty combat and lack of tightness in analog movement makes it hard to stomach. And when you combine these flaws with the poorly handled transitions between execution and composition, the game starts to lose its focus. But as Hawking points out in his speech, that doesn't necessarily mean a game can't be good. Too much intentionality in any game leads to players mastering a system, and then the developer has to introduce new systems to challenge the player. It's a complicated concept to distill, but Hawking supports a focus on helping players express themselves when they play, rather than inviting the player to beat a game. The best example of this is FIFA. You can never really beat FIFA because of the way the game of football works. You can theoretically play FIFA until you've mastered the controls and the AI, but you still never really beat the game of FIFA. And this is where I think Zelda finds its feet and where the franchise is going in the future. The transitions between execution and composition in combat might be poorly considered, and eventually it challenges player failure tolerance, but it does provide enough of a spine for the world building, exploration, and puzzle solving. And that's what Zelda is. It's getting lost in a beautiful, charming world. There's no real direction in a lot of Breath of the Wild, and you can straight up just miss whole main quests if you don't stumble upon certain characters. You can ignore every main quest and fight Ganon after 2 or 3 hours of gameplay. It's an honest-to-God open game, if nothing else. There's an immediacy in the solitude of Breath of the Wild. Rolling green fields, lakes concealing dangers, and a seemingly impossible, beautiful post-apocalyptic land invites you not to just explore, but to discover. Not having companions and not having complicated interfaces or stealth mechanics means you can relax as you explore. Your main challenges are whether or not you're wearing warm enough clothes or if you're going to run out of stamina climbing a mountain. The silent, sleeping kingdom of Hyrule is a beautiful place to experience, and the sophisticated rendering of this world is what makes Zelda so successful, and what made it so successful 30 years ago, and is perhaps why we come back to play. It's not just about killing enemies or salvaging lost treasures, but the opportunity to close our eyes and become lost in a dream.